Here's the sad reality of being a software engineer in 2026. Working harder is not enough anymore. Knowing more frameworks is not enough anymore. And if you're wondering why you're still in the same role at the same salary, watching other engineers get promoted or land AI jobs that seem out of reach, this video is going to explain exactly why. Because five things change in our industry, and most engineers are still fighting the wrong battle. AI didn't just change the tools, it changed what you're worth. Companies are repricing software engineers right now, not eliminating it, they're just repricing it. So AI generates code in seconds. You even have concepts of, vibe coding, where people who don't even know how to code is able to generate some type of code. So the engineer who just writes code is no longer the scarce resource. What companies are paying for is 200K plus. What they're paying 200K plus for is someone who can take a real business problem, build an AI solution around it. And that's where most engineers haven't made the switch yet. Not because they can't, but because they haven't really realized what is actually happening. I've seen this repressing happen in the VFX industry. That's where I was originally from, working in film. The engineers who survived weren't the ones who resisted the new tools. They were the ones who mastered them first. The layoffs weren't random. The developers who got cut weren't the least experienced. Many were solid engineers with years on the job. What they had in common, they were completing tasks. And that's the main thing. They were just executing tasks and not actually owning outcomes. So there's a difference between strategy and tactics. So they made themselves really easy to replace. You see, a strategy, someone who puts things in place and owning the outcomes, they are responsible. They're the go-to person and they give them the task. Go figure this out. How they actually complete the task, whether they do it themselves, hire the team, use AI, that's up to them. But if you just showcase you're just completing tasks, then the mindset would be, okay, well, we could just find something else or another tool that could just complete that task. But if you own the outcome, then they'll associate you with the person as, if we want this outcome to happen, we'll go to this person. We don't know how they're doing it, whether they're hiring people using AI. We just know that if we want it done, we go to this person. Companies are cutting engineers and hiring AI engineers at the same time. And that's not a contradiction. That's actually a signal. I've watched this happen to engineers I knew personally. They were good people, hardworking, but never made themselves hard to replace. They basically just executed the tasks and just showed, okay, you give me a task, I complete it. They never really been associated with owning the outcomes as this is the go-to person. They will be the one to solve this. And they're the ones who actually own it, right? So here's the uncomfortable truth. If your value lives in completing assigned work, you're basically one reorg away from being expendable. I want to point out that most people are playing catch up on the wrong thing. So most engineers who feel behind are responding by learning more, like more frameworks, getting more certification, doing more courses. I would say that's the wrong move, at least just doing that by itself without a plan behind it, because the gap isn't technical. It's actually positional. Companies aren't paying for engineers who knows the most tools. They're paying for the ones who could solve the most valuable problems. That's what companies are hiring for. Can you solve the problem? Okay, what tools do you need? What resources do you need? What people? What's your team? They just want to know you could actually solve the problem. So in my personal experience in VFX, I wasn't necessarily the absolute best animator or rigger. I was very good. But what I mean by that is that if I'm not there, there are other people in the world who could do this as well, and they could hire or on the team as well. It's possible for it to get done. But what I understood was the real production problems, the real bottlenecks, and the things that cost money on the project. So that domain knowledge is what kind of separated me from anyone else, because I was able to assess it and actually put forth solutions. And then after they could execute it, again, I was owning the problem, not just executing. And this is what I mean where you see you could be the absolute best person at executing. Okay, that might seem good, but if you're the person who could actually have the domain knowledge and basically have the foresight to avoid problems, save money, or make them money and avoid real bottlenecks, that's where you become real valuable and you're at the head of the table, and you'll find other people who are better than you to do these other jobs, to actually execute on this stuff. But you become invaluable at that point. And not only that, domain knowledge, that became my edge, especially when I added AI on top of that, right? So you have to really reframe your way of thinking. Years of software engineering experience isn't your background. That is actually your positioning advantage. Most engineers ignore it while chasing another framework. Here's a reality check. Nobody knows what you actually are capable of. You could be the most technically capable developer on your team and still get passed over because nobody above you can see it. They just see the end results at the end. They don't know the attributions of who did what and why and how important they are to it unless you make yourself known for that. Engineers who get promoted and pull into high leverage work aren't always the most technical, but they're the ones who make complex problems easy to understand for decision makers. This is so important to understand. To understand this concept is that you need the right people to have eyes and visibility on optics on what you're doing, right? If you can't communicate your value in business terms, you're invisible. It doesn't matter how clean your code is at all. I've seen brilliant engineers I worked with got let go, not because their work was bad, but because nobody could understand what that person was doing or why it mattered. And this is the part. You have to highlight why it mattered in business terms to decision makers. This is quieter than other realities, but it costs just as much. Actually, I would say it costs even more. So, not understanding or putting this together. In fact, I wrote a book on this because a lot of times I encounter a lot of technical people not understanding. Think just because they are really, really good at what they do, to get passed over and wonder why someone who is just a lot more social or a lot more active or a lot more visible are the ones getting all the promotions and getting their ideas pushed forward is because decision makers are aware of them and they understand the value they bring in terms of the business. This is what you need to do. The window is open right now, but it won't stay that way forever. AI engineering hiring market is one of the most aggressive I've seen. Companies are paying 200K plus and cannot find enough people. Every time I log into LinkedIn or get these notifications, there's a new company looking for innovation lead, AI lead, and all these companies are not necessarily tech companies. It's every different facet, different industries, and it's been like a huge boom since like the beginning of 2026 for a job role that didn't exist before that. They're coming, and these people who are actually applying and getting these jobs, people I know personally, are people coming from backend, DevOps, data work. But there's one difference. They pointed out what they could do with AI and how they could have an impact on the business goals. For someone with real engineering background, this is only like 3 to 4 months of transition. It doesn't take like 2 years. I have to go get another degree for it. And I've done it, and I literally watch other people do it. They see something, they speak to someone or talk to a company, and they're like, "Hey, I know people who've done IT and did backend and DevOps, and they're speaking to even like local businesses, and they see they have an issue, a problem they can't solve that they know they could solve with AI, and just with a couple of weeks, couple of months of researching the problem, and with their knowledge backend, came up with a solution, and got their clients or work for a company for it. And not only that, they became the person that is known. They own the outcome. They know how to actually solve the problem. So now other companies are coming towards them to solve that same problem because you could actually get an outcome, not because you have a certain certification or because you have a certain title, you went back to school, because you actually solve their business goal right there. The demand is real, the salaries are real, but the window to get in before it's crowded as traditional software engineering is right now. Here are the next steps. The sad reality of being a software engineer in 2026 isn't that the job is dying. It's more that most engineers will wait too long before it realize it's transforming. A lot of people are even putting their head in the sand saying, oh, this is just like a fad, but AI is already here. The ones who move now will be completely different position in 12 months than the ones who wait and just see how it goes. If you want the exact steps to make that move, the skills, the positioning, the path to 200K plus AI role, then check out the links in the description.